Sequels, even in gaming, are often hard to pull off for a variety of reasons. Maybe they just don't live up to their predecessors in terms of gameplay, maybe they didn't evolve enough, or maybe they're too different from what came before that alienates the original audience. Frostpunk 2 arguably sort of toes the line with some of the core concepts from the first game, but definitely and boldly changes a lot of the systems you use to engage with those concepts like heating, population management, governance, and so forth. A great example of this would be that instead of implementing laws or reforms directly like in Frostpunk 1 from a book of laws, you have to go through a council system that involves 3 to 4 other political factions, which is paired with an expansive idea tree, producing said legislative ideas or research or buildings that each of those factions want to back. I think if you enjoyed the first Frostpunk, you may appreciate some of the newer gameplay mechanics, but it will probably take some time for you to adjust or even warm up to some of the newer things, like the economic currency of heat stamps, which I found a bit annoying. Overall, I would recommend Frostpunk 2 if you are into city building or management games. I don't think it has too much of a complex depth to it compared to, say, Crusader Kings 3, but I think it will satisfy a lot of people's taste for basic political intrigue with resource and population management involved. In terms of settings and accessibility, Frostpunk 2 offers a surprising amount of things, including 4 difficulties, support for 14 different languages, a Twitch integration for viewer participation, which can be quite hilarious, and solid upscaling options that not only includes DLSS but also XeSS. The performance of the game is top-notch. I had absolutely no issues with running the game at all, although the autosaves do sometimes freeze up the game more than I'd like once you get to a certain point in your rebuilt civilization. The UI or user interface definitely takes time getting used to if you're coming right away from the first game, and of course if you're just playing Frostpunk 2 a while after or this is your introduction to the now franchise, the UI and user experience in navigating the different panels and such could, in my opinion, have been handled better, particularly with the interactions between the world map now offered in Frostpunk 2 and the management of the different cities or settlements. Just like the first Frostpunk, the audio or music of Frostpunk 2 really tries to immerse you in the moments with booming cacophonies when a whiteout storm is taking place, or even when you're sort of idly waiting for more resources to proceed building your primary city. There are definitely some great moments with both the audio combined with the campaign. Story writing I think people in general will appreciate. Speaking of the campaign, the story is pretty straightforward. There are of course references to the first game, but for the most part it stands on its own, with a particular emphasis on growing society more so than emphasizing that humanity needs to get together and do anything it can do to survive the constant apocalyptic blizzards that have frozen the planet. Visually, the game looks great. I have no complaints with any of the graphics or what the game presents, from the glow of the power lines to the weather system itself. Gameplay-wise, Frostpunk 2 can often feel disconnected and less intimate compared to its predecessor, which I think was a bit of a risky double-edged blade here. For example, you don't really see a lot of people walking around until you zoom in on a particular part of a section of a district you had built, and even then, it's a paltry amount of people. The first game really gave you that intimacy with what was essentially your tribe or small town of people, and you being able to see them walk around and do activities with not a lot of restrictions reinforced that intimacy. Yet in Frostpunk 2, you have to use a bit of your imagination, aided by the event or story pop-ups that you can read to immerse yourself in what the people are experiencing rather than seeing it a bit more directly on the screen. Although there are moments when there's protests, you can zoom in on that one particular part of that one particular district they're protesting in and see it, but it's just not as impactful as, say, the first game. However, this disconnect from reality on the ground is probably intended by the game developers, as Frostpunk 2 canonically takes place a few decades or so after the events of the first game, and there's a lot more people to manage, and realistically, as history has shown us, once humans, including yourself, are put in charge of so many people, they tend to get disconnected or view others as statistics or numbers at the end of the day. The building system, once you understand it, is relatively straightforward, although I think for people who want to stay organized from the get-go, you have to just accept you'll need to demolish quite a bit of what you built for a so-called perfect layout due to the tile and frostbreak system. Probably the two biggest systems you engage with the most outside the actual building aspect will be the political faction system, where you definitely need to stay wary and attentive, especially on the higher difficulties, although eventually once you get to a certain point you can definitely mistreat one or two of them pretty blatantly depending on your progression. The other system is that unlike Frostpunk 1, which had several separated the exploration map and the city map, the former for expeditionary missions you send scouts on for stories or resources, and the latter for you to actually play on, Frostpunk 2 essentially merged both these maps into one big world map, which I think was a great move as this new system offers more gameplay options or mechanics like settlements and a live view of the decisions you make in regards to the stories you encounter out in the Frostlands. So you'll be zooming out quite a lot to look at the world map and zooming back into your city effortlessly, micromanaging missions while also checking up on your holdings, which I think also does contribute to the aforementioned feeling of disconnectedness from your people. In my opinion, the worst parts, however, about Frostpunk 2 is probably the new currency system of heat stamps or maybe even manpower, because again, it's a growing society you're managing. They need to trade, they need a currency as opposed to everyone pulling together and surviving no matter what heinous act in the first game. Unfortunately, you also need a lot of this currency or manpower to build, maintain, and do things like paving new ground. Particularly on the higher difficulties, there are prolonged periods of you just sort of waiting and watching the game early or mid-game, even on the faster forward speeds, waiting for heat stamp income or population increases to come in while all of your other stockpiles of materials, food, goods, and prefabricated stuffs are in a surplus. It definitely felt like these two things were unnecessary time gates that bottlenecked my gameplay experience more so than something I could engage with more meaningfully, even through the faction or building systems. With all this being said, I think the replayability factor of Frostpunk 2 is super high. I'm already almost 14 hours into the game after finishing the campaign on a higher difficulty, and there's definitely enough content here before any potential DLC to sort of chew on slowly for sure if you're ever feeling the itch for a city management game or just anything Frostpunk. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this review. If you've also played Frostpunk 2, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the game or what game you'd like us to check out next. If you enjoyed the video or want to check in later, definitely subscribe to the channel to support us for a variety of content. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you guys next time.